There's a moment that doesn't arrive all at once. It builds slowly, almost invisibly. At first, you don't notice anything is wrong. You're just working hard. You're doing what's expected of you, maybe even a little more. You're motivated, you care, you want to do things properly. You want to be someone others can rely on. So you say yes. Yes to helping. Yes to staying a bit longer. Yes to taking responsibility. And none of that is wrong. In fact, those are good qualities. They're the kind of qualities people respect. The kind that build trust, that open doors, that make you feel like you're moving forward. But there's a point, very subtle, where something shifts. Being helpful stops being something you choose and becomes something that's expected. And you don't notice when that line is crossed, because it doesn't happen all at once. Responsibilities don't suddenly appear in full force. They accumulate. At first, they're within your role, then slightly outside of it, then completely outside of it. And by the time you realize what's happening, you've already become the person who handles things. And once you become that person, everything starts flowing toward you. Not necessarily because people are trying to take advantage of you in a conscious way, but because systems naturally move toward the path of least resistance. And you became that path. Over time, it stops being just about tasks. It becomes about identity. You're no longer just someone doing a job. You become the reliable one, the one who fixes things, the one who doesn't drop the ball. And at first, that feels good. It gives you a sense of value. It makes you feel needed, respected, important. But there's a cost to that identity. Because once you start seeing yourself as the person who holds everything together, stepping back doesn't feel like a neutral decision anymore. It feels like failure. It feels like letting people down. So you keep going. You take on more. You stretch a little further. You push a bit harder. And somewhere along the way, something else starts to happen. The effort you're putting in stops being seen. Not because it's not there, but because it becomes normal. And what becomes normal becomes invisible. The extra effort, the extra responsibility, the extra time, it all blends into the background. The recognition doesn't grow with it. The compensation doesn't reflect it. The structure doesn't support it. And the boundaries never really existed in the first place. At the beginning, you feel motivated, committed, even proud. But slowly, almost without realizing it, that shifts into something else. You start feeling tired, then frustrated, then overwhelmed, and eventually, something heavier settles in. You feel resentful, drained, used, and still you keep going, because part of you believes that if you just hold on a little longer, things will improve. That maybe this is just a phase, that maybe all this effort will eventually be recognized. But then comes a moment. And it's not always dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet. It's sitting at your desk and realizing you have no energy left. It's being asked to do one more thing and feeling like you might collapse under the weight of it. It's wanting to cry, not because of one specific task, but because of everything that has built up over time. And that's when it becomes clear you're not just tired, you're burned out. And that realization is uncomfortable because it forces you to see something deeper. It forces you to acknowledge that this didn't happen overnight, and it didn't happen entirely outside of you. You were not weak, you were not foolish, but you were available without limits. And in environments that don't have clear structure, unlimited availability turns into unlimited demand. When you finally start thinking about leaving, something else appears. Guilt. It comes in quietly, but convincingly. You tell yourself you can't leave now, that they need you, that you should finish everything first, that it wouldn't be right to walk away at this moment. And it feels real, it feels justified. But if you look closely, that guilt is not really about ethics. It's about a pattern where your sense of value has been tied to how much you carry. Where being good means being available, reliable, and endlessly accommodating. So of course the idea of leaving feels wrong, because it feels like you're stepping out of the role you've been playing for so long. But here's the shift that needs to happen. Responsibility does not mean doing everything yourself. It doesn't mean staying until everything is perfect. It doesn't mean sacrificing your well-being for the sake of completion. Responsibility means doing your part properly. It means leaving things in a state that someone else can understand and continue. It means respecting the work, but also respecting yourself. There is a difference between being responsible and being consumed. At some point, something inside you changes. You stop asking how to survive the situation and you start asking a different question. Why am I still here? And that question is powerful because it brings the focus back to you. Not to expectations, not to obligations, not to what others might think, but to your own life, your own limits, your own well-being. Leaving doesn't have to be chaotic. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It doesn't have to come from anger. It can be calm, it can be planned, it can be professional. You give notice, you organize your work, you allow for a transition, and then you leave. Not because you don't care, but because you finally decided to include yourself in the equation. And if there's one thing that matters after that, it's this: not repeating the same pattern. Because if nothing changes internally, the same situation will eventually recreate itself somewhere else. So you begin to understand that being always available is not what makes you valuable. It's what makes you vulnerable to being overextended. You stop building your identity around being the person who handles everything, because you realize that identity depends on constant self-sacrifice to survive. You learn to pause before saying yes. Even a small pause can change everything. It gives you space to think, to choose, instead of reacting automatically. You begin to accept that not everything needs to be perfect. That clear and good is often enough. That perfection is sometimes just the mind's way of keeping you trapped in overcommitment. And maybe most importantly, you start separating what is yours from what is not. Not every problem around you belongs to you. Not every gap needs to be filled by you. And if you take ownership of everything, you slowly lose ownership of yourself. Guilt will still appear. It doesn't disappear overnight, but you begin to see it differently. You understand that it's not always a sign that you're doing something wrong. Sometimes it's simply a sign that you're doing something new, that you're breaking a pattern that has been with you for a long time. And if you're moving into something of your own, if you're building a business, a firm, a new path, this awareness becomes even more important. Because without structure, you will recreate the same conditions. You'll work endlessly. You'll take on everything. You'll become the center of everything. And eventually, you'll find yourself in the same place again, but with even more pressure. So you build differently, you define roles, you create limits, you set expectations with clients, you design a system that doesn't depend entirely on you holding everything together, because success is not about doing everything. It's not about being everywhere at once. It's not about carrying everything on your own. Success is about being consistent, clear, sustainable, and still having energy left for your life. If you recognize yourself in this, if you feel tired, overwhelmed, or used, there is nothing wrong with you. You adapted to a situation that didn't have limits, but now you've seen it. And once you see it, you don't have to stay in it. You can choose differently, not perfectly, not instantly, but intentionally. And that's where everything begins to change. If you are going through the same, I hope this helps you. Remember, I am not a guru or a teacher, but a follow and a like would be greatly appreciated. Humbly, just an eldest daughter.